So if we can go into life, I mean, life is enormous, and it's almost, yes, there's a beginning and there's an end, but how would you define the life experience?
So again, in the book we go over what is life, is there design in the universe? So we've kind of covered that already in last week. What makes us human? Okay, so that is what makes us maybe different than a plant or a tree or a microbe or an animal. And I think what makes us different, and so far as we know, because we can't get inside the consciousness of another being, that we are the only ones that have self-awareness. We are aware that we are aware. And as a result, we have the ability to consciously make choices. We have free will. Most people don't exercise that because they get conditioned by advertising or media or whatever into very predictable outcomes. But if you recognize that every moment is a choice, and that every moment the choice determines the situations and circumstances of the next moment, then you in a sense are a creator. You are almost divine. So I think the human consciousness is not that other consciousness is not divine, it's all an expression of one consciousness, but through self-awareness and the ability to consciously create the situations, circumstances, events, relationships of our life, we have a sense of meaning and purpose. And that makes us very unique. Now maybe there are other beings like that, but I think we are at this moment, the kind of next phase of evolution in the universe. There's a beautiful poem of Rumi. It says, when I die, I will soar with angels. When I die to the angels, what I shall become, you cannot imagine, because you'll need a new imagination. Insight, intuition, imagination, creativity, free will and choice, conscious evolution makes us human, which, as far as we know, other humans don't have it. And then in this section, by the way, we also dealt with how do genes work, and I just want to go over that a little bit, because until recently we thought that genes are fixed, and now we know actually that genes are very fluid. They go on and off depending on our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions, our relationships, whether we do exercise or not, whether how we sleep, how much stress we have, the food we take. In other words, genes are actually the sequencing of genes, which makes proteins in our body and basically makes our body, essentially. It's the alphabet of life. They're fluid. They go on and off depending on what's happening in our life. So now, as conscious human beings, we can regulate our genes through our thinking, through our feeling, through our social interactions, through our personal relationships. And so only maybe 5 to 6% of genes, you get inherited mutations that you can't do anything about. Now, I have a friend at Harvard Medical School, Harvard University, who's a geneticist, who's a neuroscientist, and he even thinks that genes do not, according, because the last part of the book is, did Darwin go wrong? So Darwin's evolution is based on what we call natural selection, and also random mutations. So mutations are random,
right, only the strongest survive, only the best of the best, that kind of idea. Right.
And that seems to be the case, but again, according to some new thinking, there may be purpose in the kind of mutations that occur. They follow what are called hotspots of distribution. They're not totally random. They seem to be directed maybe from within, what we call information-directed evolution. There seems to be a feedback loop that, an intended future influences the mutation of the present, All of this is not proved yet. But the point is, if these things like genetic modulation through consciousness, gene mutation through essentially consciousness, because behavior and relationships are expressions of consciousness, everything else. If these things all pan out, we'll have a completely new definition of life, which is we are part of a living universe, which is purpose-driven, directed, what is called teleological, intelligent, going back upon itself, and evolving.
So could people
growing.
essentially heal themselves from thinking positively? I mean, it's the idea of, well, there's a history of breast cancer in my family. Is this a genetic mutation that I can suppress, change, or is that something that's the 5% inherited and I can't do anything about?
Okay, so that's a good question. First of all, to say, can thinking change my genes? Well, thinking is very complicated. It's not just thinking, it's behavior.
Right.
It's food, it's diet, it's relationships, social environment, the natural environment, stresses, all of that, that modulate the genes. Having said that, what we're discovering is that 90 to 95% of so-called genetic mutations are actually acquired, that you're not born with them. Now, you might be born with a genetic mutation that makes it almost totally deterministic that that person will get cancer or Huntington's chorea or a certain type of Alzheimer's. And so far as we know, we can't do anything about those at the present time. In the future, we might be through technology. But I can say that at least 500 genes that code for things like inflammation, heart disease, certain types of cancer, not all types, autoimmune illnesses, these can be upregulated or downregulated. Upregulated means you improve the expression of the genes. So you're not changing the genes, you're just changing their activity.
Okay.
Okay, so that is something new. There's also now information that people who practice certain kinds of meditation, they increase the telomerase level. Telomerase is an enzyme that regulates the length of telomeres, which are like little buttons at the end of chromosomes that determine how long you live. Now, if a mental practice can change telomerase activity, regulate genes to do that, that's pretty amazing, and we'll learn a lot more about this.
That could be the fountain of youth.
Well, it could be part of the fountain of youth.
Now, I do want to continue and go into the mind and brain in our next section.